He hadn't spoken to another soul in over a decade. Not since the war, not since the fire, not since the world he knew went up in smoke. Isaiah Griggs lived alone at the edge of a forgotten valley in Mississippi. Just him, the wind, and the ghosts he pretended not to hear. Most folks assumed he was dead, and Isaiah was content to let them believe it. He was sitting by the fire that night, rain hammering the tin roof like God's own wrath, patching an old saddle strap that didn't really need fixing, just something to keep his hands busy. Outside, the storm tore at the land, dragging limbs from trees and flinging mud against the walls of his cabin. No one with sense would be out in that weather. That's why the knock froze him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polite. It was frantic, urgent, the sound of desperation wrapped in bone. Isaiah didn't move. Not at first. The leather strap in his hand went slack, the needle dangling. That cabin hadn't seen visitors in 10 years. Not since he buried everything that made him human. Not since the army took his brother in chains. Not since he shot a man for trying to take what little he had left. The knock came again, louder this time. Then voices. Feminine, breathless, soaked in panic. At first, he thought he was imagining things. The wind often played tricks with the ears, especially when your mind was already full of whispers. But no, he could hear them clearly now. Please, one voice called out, strong and tired all at once. We mean no harm. We just need shelter. Just for tonight. Isaiah stood slowly, his knees stiff from age and silence. His hand went, without thought, to the rusted shotgun resting above the mantel. The weapon still worked. He made sure of it. Every week. But something stopped him from grabbing it. Maybe it was the way the voice cracked at the edges. Not demanding, not threatening. Maybe it was the storm's intensity, the way the wind seemed to lean into the walls like it wanted inside too. Or maybe it was the way that voice reminded him of Ruth. Ruth had been kind to strangers. Isaiah had hated that about her. He approached the door, footsteps slow but steady on creaking floorboards. The firelight flickered behind him, casting long shadows. He placed his palm flat against the door, and for a moment just listened. There were 10 voices, women, all of them, and beneath the panic in their tones, he heard something else. Terror. Not of the storm, but of what was behind them. Another voice, deeper, calmer, rose above the rest, spoke clearly, each word weighted with desperation. If you leave us out here, we won't survive the night. And if they find our bodies on your porch, they'll kill you too. Isaiah's fingers hovered over the iron bar that sealed the door from the inside. He hadn't unlatched it in 10 years. Not for man, woman, or devil. But something in that voice, God help him, cut straight through his silence. He slid the bar free. The door opened with a groan that sounded like the house itself was weeping. And there they were, 10 women, soaked to the bone, mud clinging to torn dresses that hadn't been meant for running. Some barefoot, some bleeding. The youngest couldn't have been more than 15, clutching a bundled child to her chest. The oldest, maybe 70, had eyes that looked like they'd watched entire lifetimes collapse. But it was the woman in the center who held his attention. Tall, proud, wounded. A gash above her eyebrow dripped blood into one eye, and her dress was torn across the shoulder, revealing dark skin covered in bruises. Her face was hard, but her voice was soft. My name is Cora, she said. These are my sisters, my daughters. We've escaped. They're chasing us. Please. Isaiah didn't answer, just stepped aside. They moved like ghosts into the warmth, the storm swirling behind them as the door slammed shut. Rainwater pooled at their feet, mixing with blood and silence. Isaiah's cabin had never felt so small. The women didn't speak right away. Some huddled by the fire. One collapsed onto the floor, cradling the baby like a precious secret. Another tore strips from her own skirt to bind a wound on someone's arm. Cora stood last, just inside the threshold. She looked at Isaiah like she saw straight through him. They're an hour behind us, she said. Maybe less. Men with dogs, guns, uniforms. Slave catchers? He asked. She nodded once. Isaiah exhaled slowly, like smoke was leaking from his soul. He'd heard stories. Bands of ex-Confederate soldiers turned bounty hunters. They didn't care if the war was over. They didn't believe in freedom. Why come here? He asked. Because we had nowhere else, she said. Because someone told us about a man in these woods who didn't talk to nobody. A ghost in the hills. And ghosts don't betray the dead. Isaiah almost smiled. Almost. You're risking my life, he said. Cora's eyes flicked toward the fire, where the youngest girl tried to warm the baby's blue fingers. We've already risked ours. He should have told them to leave. Should have sent them back into the storm. But Isaiah Griggs hadn't been a good man in years, and good men didn't leave children to die in the mud. There's a cellar, he said, under the kitchen. Hidden. Stone walls. No light, no heat. But it might hold all of you. We won't hide, Cora replied. Not unless you do too. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. You plan to fight? Cora's voice lowered, the words like coals under ash. We didn't survive all this way to die with our hands tied. That was when he noticed the glint of metal tucked beneath her belt, and the fire in her eyes. Isaiah didn't sleep that night. While the women huddled together near the fire or cleaned each other's wounds, he sat in his wooden chair, shotgun across his lap, staring at the front door like it might vanish if he blinked. The storm had begun to slow. That was the worst part. Noise had been their only protection. Now, each moment of quiet was another second closer to the sound of hooves. Wet, deliberate, and full of purpose. Isaiah's cabin was no fortress. The walls were solid, yes. He'd built them with his own hands back in '52, when he still had dreams and a wife who hummed in the garden. But dreams and nails rot the same with time. The window shutters rattled when the wind touched them, and the door's hinges whined like old dogs. This place had kept him hidden for 10 years. But it wasn't made to defend anything. Cora was the only one awake besides him. She stood near the back window, her silhouette long and still, watching the trees sway in the moonless dark. Her face was unreadable, stone carved by war, loss, and fury. The blood on her temple had dried into a dark crack along her cheekbone. You got family? Isaiah asked, voice like gravel. Cora didn't turn. I did, she said. 3 brothers, a husband, a mother who taught me to sharpen blades before I was old enough to cook. And now it's just the ones in this room. Isaiah nodded slowly. He knew that kind of answer. They both sat in silence again, but not the comfortable kind. This was the heavy stillness before a hammer drops. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something outside is holding its breath with you. Why you? Isaiah finally asked. Why lead them? Cora turned this time, and in her eyes he saw the heat of someone who'd had to earn leadership with blood. Because I said no first, she replied. When they came for us. When they said we'd be sold downriver. When they burned our homes and laughed at the screams. Her jaw tightened. They beat me until they thought I was broken. But I was just waiting. Isaiah felt a deep, old ache in his chest. A familiar one. The kind that never left. As dawn crept up through the dripping trees, the mist thickened, and the forest exhaled steam. The women rested as best they could. Some slumped against the walls, others curled on the floor near the fire's dying warmth. The baby had stopped crying. That was either a mercy or a warning. Isaiah checked the cellar. It wasn't large, bare stone, low ceiling, and barely enough air for 10. But it might hide them long enough. Still, he doubted it. Men who hunted for money didn't give up easily. When he came back up, Cora was waiting at the kitchen door. They'll be here soon, she said. We heard them last night. Closer than we thought. Isaiah loaded the shotgun. You ever killed a man? He asked. Cora didn't answer. She didn't need to. They heard them before they saw them. Just before noon, when the sun burned high and the mud had begun to dry at the edges, came the sound of riders. 6, no, 8 horses, slow, deliberate. the creak of saddles, the jangle of metal, and voices, faint but unmistakable. Men, confident, cold. Isaiah peeked through the side window, just a slit between boards. They wore blue coats, but their boots and faces weren't clean like soldiers. These men didn't represent anything but their own greed. At the front rode a tall figure with a gray beard and eyes like dead glass. "That's Morrison," Cora whispered behind him. "You sure?" "I'll never forget that man's face," she said. "He smiled while my husband burned." Isaiah watched as the men dismounted, scanning the woods. One of them kicked at the mud like he was annoyed by the delay. Another raised a hand, signaling the group to spread out. "They'll try to flank," Isaiah muttered. "Search the place back to front. They won't knock." Cora nodded. "Then we make it hard for them." Isaiah looked at her, and something shifted in his face. He wasn't afraid anymore, just tired. "Get the others into the cellar," he said. "If things go wrong, don't wait. There's a back tunnel through the stone. You crawl until you smell pine. It'll lead you out behind the ridge." "You built a tunnel?" "I don't trust doors," he replied. She hesitated, then grabbed his hand. It surprised him. "You don't have to die with us," she said. Isaiah's laugh was hollow. "I already did." By the time the soldiers reached the front porch, Isaiah stood alone in the center of the room, shotgun aimed at the door, breath steady. The knock came, but this time it wasn't desperate. It was theatrical, the kind of knock that dared you to resist. "Open up," a voice drawled. "We're looking for some runaways. Might have passed this way. You see anything suspicious, old man?" Isaiah didn't answer. His fingers tightened on the barrel. "You don't open this door," the voice continued. "We assume you're harboring criminals, which makes you a criminal, too." Still no answer. The silence stretched. Then came the crack, wood splintering, a boot smashing against the door. The cabin shuddered. Another kick. And then, Isaiah fired through the door. The buckshot tore the wood apart in a thunderclap, followed by a scream and a heavy fall. Then chaos. Gunfire erupted. Windows shattered. Isaiah dropped behind the table just as bullets ripped through the walls. From the back of the cabin, two women burst from cover, knives flashing, moving like shadows between beams. Screams followed. Another shot rang out. A soldier collapsed through the doorway, throat open. The next man barely made it 2 steps inside before Cora hit him with the butt of a stolen rifle. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. This wasn't her first time. Blood sprayed across the wall. Isaiah ducked and reloaded, cursing the ache in his arms. He hadn't fought since the war, but his body remembered. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay sprawled across the floor. One crawled back toward the porch, leaving a crimson trail behind him. Outside, the others regrouped. Isaiah could hear them shouting, arguing. Then came Morrison's voice. "You had your chance, Griggs," he bellowed. "You've chosen death." Cora stood in the doorway, blood on her hands. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. "We didn't choose death," she shouted back. "We chose justice." The cabin smelled of blood and gunpowder, the kind of scent that stuck to your skin long after the wounds were gone. 3 dead men lay twisted across Isaiah's floor. A 4th bled out on the porch, his breath shallow, his eyes vacant with disbelief. His fingers still twitched as if trying to grab onto life. But it had already left him. Inside the cabin, the women moved with purpose, not panic. They dragged the bodies aside, reloading weapons and checking wounds. The youngest crouched beside her baby, who now slept in a crate padded with Isaiah's old coats. He didn't ask how the child had slept through the violence. Some things weren't meant to be questioned. Isaiah leaned against the fireplace, the stock of his shotgun warm in his hands. His ears rang. His arms ached. But his heart was louder than ever, like it had started beating again for the first time in years. "You all right?" Cora asked. He glanced at her. Her dress was stained deep red now, but not all of it was her blood. The knife she carried dripped steadily onto the floor. "I'm too old for this," he muttered. We all are. Outside, the storm had passed. But the real danger hadn't. The remaining soldiers, 4, maybe 5, had retreated into the trees, regrouping. Isaiah watched them through the cracks in the window shutters. He saw the way they pointed, gestured, argued. He saw one spit into the dirt. Another wiped blood from his arm. And in the middle stood Morrison. He was taller than Isaiah remembered. Broader. The last time they'd crossed paths had been 15 years ago. Before the war, before the raids, before the fire. Back then, Morrison wore a preacher's smile and a Confederate pin. He'd ridden into towns like a gentleman. Left like a demon. Now, he was dressed in half-military rags. The coat of a Union captain layered over gray Southern trousers. A contradiction in fabric, just like in morals. Is that really him? Isaiah asked Cora. Her expression didn't change. That's the man. Isaiah exhaled slowly. I should have killed him when I had the chance. The women reinforced the doors and windows, stacking furniture and pulling out knives hidden in cloth bundles. They'd clearly done this before. Cora moved between them like a general. Not giving orders, just making sure everyone was ready. We can't win a siege, Isaiah said quietly. We're not staying here, she replied. We used this place to buy time. That's all. Then what's the plan? We move at dusk, Cora said. They'll expect us to wait. But we go before dark. Isaiah looked at the blood-stained floor, at the shattered window panes, at the fading light outside. And if they come before that? Cora smiled grimly. Then we die fighting. It was during that uneasy wait that the past came back. Isaiah sat on the porch steps, cleaning his shotgun, when one of the women, an older one named Leah, approached with a small bundle of cloth. She handed it to him wordlessly. He unwrapped it, revealing a folded Confederate flag, torn, dirted, faded. He stared at it like it was poison. I thought you should see it, Leah said. We took it off one of the men. Isaiah stood slowly. Where's the rest of his gear? Leah pointed to the shed where they'd piled the bodies and weapons. Isaiah walked over, heart thudding. He searched through the pile and found a satchel, a black leather bag with brass buttons. Inside were maps, tobacco, and a set of papers sealed with a blood-red stamp. He opened them. His breath caught. Cora saw his face change and approached. What is it? Isaiah's fingers trembled as he handed her the papers. It's a list, he said, of raids. She scanned the pages. Names of plantations, dates, slave counts, notes on resistance. And at the bottom, one name underlined in red. Red Hollow Plantation, Fire Purge, 12 survivors unaccounted. Cora's mouth tightened. That's where we were, she said. That's what they called it after they burned it down. Red Hollow. Isaiah looked at her. You're on this list. She nodded. And now we know why Morrison won't stop. Isaiah's mind swirled. Morrison hadn't just been hunting fugitives. He'd been cleaning up witnesses. At dusk, the decision was made. They would move through the back tunnel, Isaiah's emergency escape, a relic from a paranoid time. It wasn't easy. The passage was narrow, winding beneath the earth for over 100 yards, ending at a stream under the ridge. From there, they could vanish into the swamp trail, a place too dangerous for most to follow. But before they could leave, someone had to stay behind. Someone had to make it look like the house was still occupied. Someone had to stall Morrison. Cora looked at Isaiah. He looked back, and then nodded. I'll give you an hour, he said. You don't have to do this. I know, he replied, but it's all I'm good for anymore. She placed a hand on his shoulder, strong, steady. You're good for more than this, she said. But I won't argue with a man who's already made peace. Isaiah didn't answer. He watched them disappear into the tunnel one by one. The baby went first, swaddled tightly against its mother's chest. Cora went last. Before vanishing into the dark, she turned. If we survive, she said, you'll have a place with us. Isaiah gave her a tired smile. I've already got a place, he said. Right here. And then the cellar door shut. Morrison came at dusk, just as Isaiah expected. He didn't knock this time. He simply called out, voice booming across the trees. Isaiah Griggs, I know what you're hiding. Come out and we'll talk like men. Isaiah stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. I don't talk to devils, he said. Morrison emerged from the woods, flanked by two of his men. He smiled wide. Still wearing that old guilt like a badge, I see. Isaiah cocked the shotgun. You never paid for what you did in Baton Rouge. And you never moved on, Morrison replied. All these years, and here you are, playing hero to a bunch of runaways. They're more than you'll ever be. Morrison's smile faded. You're outgunned, outnumbered, and too damn old to shoot straight. Isaiah raised the shotgun and pulled the trigger. The blast knocked one of Morrison's men off his feet. The other ducked behind a tree. Isaiah ducked too, rolling back into the house. Gunfire erupted again. Bullets tearing into the walls, splinters flying. But Isaiah didn't stop. He kept moving, kept firing, kept delaying. Because every second was a second closer to their escape. Outside, Morrison screamed, "Burn it down!" And then came the fire. The fire spread fast. Too fast. Morrison's men had come prepared. They soaked cloth with lamp oil, tied it to arrows, and lit them from torches like they were roasting pigs instead of burning down a man's life. The first arrow punched through the roof. The second burst through the east wall. Flames licked the ceiling in moments. Smoke coiled like a serpent through the beams, hissing, clawing at the air. Isaiah coughed hard, the acrid sting biting deep into his lungs. He stumbled backward, shielding his face with a blanket that already smelled of gunpowder and blood. The flames roared louder than any cannon fire he'd heard in the war. This wasn't just destruction. This was erasure. They didn't want survivors. They wanted no memory left of the women they hunted. And that meant erasing him too. He backed deeper into the cabin, not toward safety, but toward the center. Toward the hearth. Toward the fire he built with his own hands 30 years ago. The irony struck him as cruel. He'd once built this home to keep the world out. Now it would die with him in it. He dropped to his knees beside the hearth and reached under the bricks. Fingers trembling, he pried loose a stone. Behind it, just as he'd hoped, lay the iron box. Locked, sealed tight, coated in dust. Inside were things no man was meant to carry forever. Letters from Ruth, the deed to his brother's land, confiscated by the army. His own discharge papers stained with blood. And something else, a silver locket. He opened it with blackened fingers. Inside, the tiny portrait of a boy with wide eyes and a crooked smile. Elijah, his son, dead before the war ended. Killed not by bullets but by fire, when Morrison's men torched the boarding house where Ruth had hidden. Isaiah had arrived too late. He always arrived too late. Until now. The fire crackled above his head. Smoke poured down the staircase. The floor groaned like it was morning. But Isaiah didn't run. He stood, walked to the front door, swung it open, and stepped into hell. Morrison stood 20 feet away, hand raised, as if preparing for a speech. The others had already lit the perimeter. Burning brush, fallen logs, and pieces of Isaiah's shed. His house blazed behind him like judgment. Isaiah didn't flinch. He stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in one hand, iron box in the other. You done? He called out. Morrison grinned like a man who thought he'd already won. Almost, he said. Just one last piece to clean up. Isaiah dropped the box onto the porch. Come take it. That made Morrison hesitate. He stepped forward, cautious now. What's in it? Proof, Isaiah said. Names, maps, orders. Every crime you and your filth committed. You left your papers on one of the men you sent to die in my house. Morrison's grin faltered. Laughter bubbled up from Isaiah's chest. Not joyful. Hollow. Broken. You never were careful even back then. Thought your badge made you untouchable. I am untouchable, Morrison growled. Not anymore. Isaiah took one step forward. Cora and the others are gone, he said. You lost them. You'll never find them again. They're ghosts now. And you? You're just a roach waiting for the boot. Morrison raised his rifle. Isaiah didn't flinch. You won't kill me clean, he said. You never do. Morrison pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the clearing like thunder. Isaiah staggered, the bullet slamming into his side. He dropped to one knee. The box spilled open. Papers fluttered out, scorched at the edges, some catching fire. Morrison stepped forward, furious. Burn it, he roared to his men. Burn it all. Another soldier grabbed the box, tossing it into the flames. Isaiah looked up, blood pouring from his side, soaking the wood beneath him. He smiled through clenched teeth. You're already dead, he whispered. Morrison didn't hear him, didn't see the flash of movement in the trees, didn't hear the arrow until it sank into his neck. The clearing exploded into chaos. Cora emerged from the shadows, bow in hand, eyes burning with vengeance. Behind her came two others, silent, fast, deadly. They struck like panthers. One soldier fell with a scream, throat slashed open. Another dropped before he could raise his rifle. Morrison staggered, clawing at the shaft embedded in his neck, gurgling, eyes wide with shock. Isaiah laughed. You should have stayed a preacher. Cora was on Morrison before he hit the ground. No words, just steel. 3 clean cuts, and the forest fell silent again. Isaiah collapsed backward onto the dirt, breath ragged, blood hot on his hands. Cora knelt beside him. He smiled weakly. You came back. She nodded. We had to be sure. He reached for her hand. Did they all make it? Yes, she said. They're safe. The baby too. Good. His eyes fluttered. I burned the house myself once, he murmured. Didn't help. Cora leaned closer. What do you want us to do with everything? Isaiah blinked slowly. Bury what you can. Burn the rest. Then vanish. Change names. Change lives. She squeezed his hand. You'll come with us. But Isaiah shook his head. My road ends here. And as the last flames consumed the cabin behind them, and Morrison's body bled into the roots, Cora and the others stood in a circle around the man who'd chosen to stand with them. They didn't sing. They didn't pray. They just watched the fire. And when the time came, they walked away into the dark, carrying no flag, no name, no trace, just each other. Ghosts of the South, still running, still fighting, but no longer alone. But Cora knew it. They all did. It was the path between what had been stolen and what might still be earned. A trail older than the war, older than the plantations, older than the lie of safety. They called it the Hollow Road. A place where runaway mothers told their children to whisper, where moss covered trees like graves, and every bend could hold salvation or death. They traveled in silence at first. The shock of what they'd done, the blood spilled, the fire, the sacrifice, clung to them like the swamp fog. Cora led them, not because she wanted to, because they still looked at her the same way they had back in Red Hollow, like she was the only one left who still believed in freedom, even when it cost everything. Behind her, 10 women walked, some barefoot, some limping, one cradling the infant with trembling arms. The baby hadn't cried once since they left Isaiah behind. It just watched the trees with wide, knowing eyes. Cora caught herself watching it too, as if it held answers no one else could say aloud. By nightfall, they reached a cluster of ruins deep in the swamp, what was once a freedman's camp during the early days of the war. Shattered chimneys rose like crooked teeth. Collapsed cabins leaned together like drunks. No roof left, no walls, but it was cover. They made a small fire in a pit dug long ago, covered it with branches to hide the glow. They cooked nothing, ate only what they could chew cold, dried berries, a strip of smoked rabbit. Cora didn't eat. She sat with her back against a tree, staring at the sky, thinking about Isaiah, about Morrison, about what came next. That night the dreams came, hot, red things, screaming children, hands grabbing in the dark, a house on fire that wouldn't go out no matter how much it rained, and a man on the porch, shotgun across his lap, whispering, "Go, don't look back." Cora woke before dawn. Her hands were shaking. The next day brought rain again, but it wasn't the forgiving kind. This rain stung, soaked through everything, turned the trail into soup and pulled the swamp closer to their feet. One of the women, Elsie, slipped on a slope and twisted her ankle. She didn't cry, just bit down on her scarf and nodded when Cora asked if she could walk. She walked, but slower. That was all it took. By midday, they weren't alone anymore. Cora felt it first. Not noise, not sight, just weight, like the trees had grown eyes. She stopped the group in a gully, under low-hanging moss, and raised a hand. No one spoke. The baby made a soft coo, then fell silent again. Cora scanned the trees, listened. Then she saw it. A footprint. Too fresh, too deep, too wide to be one of theirs. "Keep moving," she whispered. But slower. The women obeyed. But inside, Cora's gut turned. Morrison was dead. But the world had no shortage of men like him. By the time they reached the edge of the high ground, the rain had stopped, but the fog thickened. They came to a fork in the trail, left toward the Black River, right toward the dead pines. Both were bad. One risked drowning. The other risked being seen. Cora chose the pines. They moved single file through skeletal trees, dead for decades, the bark peeling like skin. That's where they heard the first voice. A man. Not far. "Shut up and keep looking. They're out here." Cora dropped low. So did the others. She held up 3 fingers. Mouthed, "Scouts." Another whisper. "How'd they even get past Morrison?" A pause. "Doesn't matter. We bring back their scalps, we get paid." Cora's jaw clenched. These weren't soldiers. These were hunters. They waited 10 minutes after the voices passed before moving again. They changed direction, now aiming for a creek that curved under the bluffs. It would take longer, but it would shield their scent, cover their tracks. But it also meant crossing the bones. Literally. The bone flats were where the old slave graveyards used to flood. When the water pulled back, it left behind cracked earth, shattered markers, and fragments of what had been buried. The women moved carefully through the field of silence. No one spoke. No one looked down. Except the baby. The baby stared at every stone like it understood. That night they didn't stop. Cora pushed them harder, faster. The ache in her legs was nothing compared to the scream in her chest. She couldn't let them be caught again. Not now. Not after Isaiah. Not after the fire. At midnight, the moon broke through the clouds, casting pale light through the trees. That's when they saw it. A lantern swinging low. Then another. Voices. Laughter. Too close. Too fast. Cora spun. "Run," she whispered. "No," hissed Leah. "Not again." Cora grabbed her arm. "Run." They fled through the woods, skirts catching on branches, feet slicing in the mud. The baby wailed once, just once, then went quiet again. Behind them, men shouted. "There!" Gunfire cracked through the trees. A shot missed Cora's leg by inches. Another tore bark beside her head. She ducked, rolled, came up behind a fallen log. The others scattered. 2 women climbed the ridge. One screamed. A shadow grabbed her ankle. Cora spun and threw her knife. It struck the man's neck with a wet thud. He collapsed. She pulled the woman up. They ran. The forest blurred. Cora didn't know how long they ran. Just that when they stopped, there were only 7 women left around her. 3 were missing. No time to cry. No time to go back. She forced them onward. By dawn, they found the old barge dock. Long abandoned. But it floated. Just barely. Cora signaled for them to climb in. They pushed off, paddling with broken branches. As the sun rose behind them, the forest glowed gold, mist rising like breath from the water. Cora looked back one last time. Smoke rose in the distance. Again. Another fire. Another home gone. But she was still standing. And this time she wasn't alone. The barge drifted through the swamp like a wounded animal. Rottenwood groaned with every wave, and the water lapped against its sides with a sound like whispering teeth. Cora sat at the front, eyes fixed on the horizon, while the others huddled together, soaked, shivering, silent. The baby didn't cry. It just clung to its mother's chest, watching the trees glide past with eyes that felt too old for its tiny body. The sun was rising now, streaking the mist with orange fire. Cora's arms ached from rowing. Her shoulders burned. But she didn't stop. Every stroke of the branch paddle was another mile from the men who hunted them. From Morrison. From Isaiah. From the fire. By noon, they reached the crossing, where the river forked and the trees thinned into tall cane. Cora steered them toward the left branch. It was slower, more tangled, but led to something important. A safe house. Or at least it used to be. Back during the war, there were dozens scattered across the South. Shacks, cellars, barns hidden behind thick woods or inside gullies. Places where runaways could rest for a night. Sometimes longer. Most had burned. But Cora remembered one, and prayed it still stood. They docked the barge where the water narrowed, dragging it behind tall reeds until it vanished under brush. Cora led them through knee-high mud and dense cane, moving like a woman possessed. The air smelled thick with mildew and heat. Bugs swarmed their faces. The youngest of the group, a girl named Mina, began to weep, but no one told her to stop. Not this time. They reached the shack just before sunset. It stood crooked, half-eaten by vines, with one side leaning against a dead cypress. The roof sagged. The porch was gone. But the door still held, and when Cora pushed it open, the familiar scent of cedar and dust greeted her like an old song. "It's here," she whispered. They stepped inside, 7 women and a baby, and closed the door behind them. Inside was dark and tight, but dry. There were still tools on the wall. A hammer, a small saw, a rusted scythe, a pile of firewood in the corner, a pot-bellied stove with a cracked pipe. Cora smiled, the smile of someone seeing a grave that still held its bones. "Help me block the windows," she said. They got to work. That night they slept in shifts. Cora stayed up first, knife in hand, sitting by the door. Rain began to fall again, soft this time, like whispers on the roof. She listened to the women breathing, to the baby's tiny snore, and to the sound of her own pulse, still not believing they'd made it. But peace, she knew, was just the space between storms. And dawn always brought new danger. In the morning, Leah found the footprint, just outside the shack. Deep, heavy, fresh. Not one of theirs. "Someone was watching," Leah whispered. "Maybe more than one." Cora stared at the mark for a long time. She bent down, dug her fingers into the soil beside it. "Too wide for any of us," she said. "Heavier than a tracker. Boots, not moccasins. Not Morrison's men? They're dead. This is someone else. Someone worse. Maybe." That afternoon they rigged traps. Nothing fancy. Just rope lines tied to loose logs, tripwires, a pit near the back wall. The women worked like soldiers, because by now they were. Mina stood watch. She hadn't spoken since they crossed the bone flats, but her eyes never stopped moving. As the sun dropped, they heard movement in the woods. Not close, but not far, not fast. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. They were waiting, watching. "Could be bounty men," Leah said. "Could be worse," said Cora. After dark, a knock came, not at the door, but on the window. 3 slow taps, then silence. Cora raised her knife. Leah clutched the stove poker. No one moved. Then a voice, rough, male, calm. "I got no weapon. Just looking for shelter." Cora crept to the window. "Who are you?" she called. "Name's Jonas. Jonas Calhoun. I run messages through these woods. Heard this place might still be open." "You alone?" "Always," he said. Something in his tone sounded honest. But honest didn't mean safe. They let him speak through the window for 5 minutes before opening the door. He stepped in slow, middle-aged, black, tall and wiry with a hunter's build and eyes that had seen too much. He carried no rifle, no blade, just a satchel and a muddy Bible. Cora stared at him. "You one of the old network?" He nodded. "Before it fell apart, yeah. Ran over 40 up the Natchez Trace. Used to stop here. Surprised it's still standing. We're not here for nostalgia." "No," he said. "You're here because someone tried to wipe you off the map. That shut everyone up." Cora narrowed her eyes. "How do you know that?" "I saw the smoke. Heard the stories. They're saying a man named Griggs went out guns blazing. Said he died protecting 10 ghost women who vanished into the swamp." He looked around. Guess they weren't ghosts after all. That night, Jonas shared what he knew. The South was boiling again. Slavers turning bounty men. Old soldiers forming bands with law on one side and cruelty on the other. And the name Morrison had been passed around like a curse, until someone found his body, stripped and burned, with his throat carved open. Some celebrated. Others whispered about revenge. "They'll come," Jonas said. "Might not be tomorrow. Might not be a week. But someone will." Cora nodded. "We'll be ready." He looked at her, curious. "You the leader?" She hesitated, then said, "No, we don't do leaders anymore." Jonas smiled at that. But while they slept, the Watcher came back. Only this time he didn't knock. He carved something into the tree outside. A symbol. 3 slashes crossed by a 4th. Old slave hunter code. Marked. The mark stared back at them at dawn. 3 vertical slashes, crossed with a 4th. Deeply carved into the bark of a sycamore just 10 feet from the shack. The tree bled sap, slow and thick, like it was trying to warn them. Cora traced the lines with her finger. It wasn't fresh. It had been done hours ago. She turned to Jonas, her voice low and sharp. "You ever seen this sign before?" He nodded, eyes grim. "Slave catcher code. From before the war. Some used it after, too. Means, target marked. Don't touch. Reserved." "Reserved," Cora repeated. "For who?" Jonas didn't answer. That day, no one left the cabin. They reinforced everything. They buried the fire pit, stuffed rags in the cracks of the floor, and wrapped the baby in thick cloth to silence even a whisper. Jonas scouted the perimeter twice, but came back both times with the same look in his eyes. Someone was watching, but they couldn't catch him. "I never seen feet move so quiet," he said. "No trail, no break in the grass. Whoever it is, he wants us scared." It was working. Leah kept a knife in her hand at all times. Mina stopped speaking entirely. Cora tried not to show it, but even she jumped at every creak of the shack. And the baby? The baby just stared at the door. Always the door. That night the wind howled. Trees groaned. And something touched the front step. They heard it, 3 slow footsteps. Then a pause. Then a whisper. Cora rose without a sound. Blade ready. So did Jonas. But no knock came. Just the smell. Smoke. They burst through the door to find a pile of dead moss smoldering on the porch. Soaked in oil. It hadn't caught, but it was close. Jonas kicked it aside and raised his knife to the darkness. "Someone wants us to panic," he said. "They're close," Cora whispered. "Too close. Then maybe it's time we stop hiding." The next morning they planned the trap. Cora didn't want to run anymore. Neither did the others. They'd been prey long enough. Now it was time to hunt. Jonas took the lead. He used old tricks, doubled footsteps, false trails, noose traps hidden under roots. Cora followed behind, setting wire lines connected to small bells and cans filled with broken glass. The women dug shallow ditches, sharp sticks, pits. Even Mina helped, her silence now filled with quiet rage. By nightfall, the cabin wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was a fortress. They left the baby with Leah inside. Then Cora, Jonas, and 2 others hid in the trees, just outside the firelight, waiting. Hours passed. Owls hooted. Crickets sang. Then silence. Then, snap. A wire. Then a clang. Then, a scream. Not theirs. A man's. Followed by a horrible gurgle. Jonas moved first, fast and low like a wolf. Cora followed, knife drawn. They found the man at the pit's edge, skewered through the thigh on a wooden stake, his mouth open in silent agony. But he wasn't alone. Another stepped out from the trees, musket in hand. He fired. The shot missed barely. Jonas threw his blade. The second man dropped, dead. They tied the survivor to a beam inside the shack. He was white, young, scared. His thigh bled badly, but not fatal. Jonas kept pressure on the wound. Cora crouched in front of him. "You followed us from the river?" The man nodded. "I didn't know what you were at first. What are we now?" He hesitated. "The ones they said to mark." "Who gave that order?" He swallowed, then said a name neither Cora nor Jonas expected. "Major Grissom." Jonas stiffened. "That devil's still alive?" "You know him?" Cora asked. Jonas nodded slowly. Grissom led the Black Unit Reclaimers. After the war, they didn't stop. They just changed uniforms and kept hunting. But now they don't call it slavery. What do they call it? Jonas looked her in the eyes. "Business." Cora stood. The man tied to the beam whimpered. "You going to kill me?" "No," she said. "You're going to deliver a message." He blinked. "What message?" Cora leaned close. "We're not running anymore." At dawn, they released him, left him limping, bleeding, but alive, enough to crawl back to whoever sent him. The others watched him disappear into the trees. Cora didn't. She had her eyes on the horizon. The time for hiding was done. They had to move again, not to run, but to strike. Because Grissom knew where they were. And Cora had just given him a reason to fear. Major Grissom didn't ride like other men. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He moved through the trees like a shadow draped in brass. Coat black, gloves cleaner than his conscience, and eyes that had watched too many men die without blinking. 6 riders followed him. All armed. All quiet. They didn't whistle. Didn't talk. Just rode behind him like ghosts answering a summons. Grissom stopped at the edge of the swamp clearing, dismounted slowly, and crouched beside the mark on the sycamore. He ran a gloved finger across the slashes. Sap stuck to the leather like blood. Then he turned to the limp man crawling up from the mud, the one Cora had spared. The man trembled, lips torn, eyes wild with pain. But he had made it back. Grissom stared down at him. "Speak." They let me go," the man gasped. "Said to give a message." Grissom waited. She said, "They're not running no more." Grissom smiled. "Cold, brittle thing." "Good," he said. "I was hoping they'd fight." That same night, miles away, Cora stood at the edge of the riverbank, staring at the water. It glowed orange from the sunset, peaceful, almost beautiful. But she didn't trust peace anymore. Leah came up beside her. "He'll come, won't he?" "Yes," Cora said. "Do we run?" "No," she said again. "We finish what Isaiah started." Back at the safe house, they made preparations. Jonas drew a map on the floor with charcoal lines showing trails, hills, water routes. The women watched as he circled one location in particular. "The old ferry crossing," he said, "collapsed after the war. One way in, no way out, unless you know where the rocks are." Cora nodded. "We lure them there." Jonas looked doubtful. "They outnumber us, outgun us, and they'll bring dogs." "We don't fight them head-on," Cora said. "We bleed them, one step at a time." She turned to the others. "I want snares, spikes, oil traps, and fire lines." Mina finally spoke for the first time in days. "Big fire," Cora nodded. "Big enough to be seen from God's porch." For 2 days they prepared. They dragged logs into place, dug pits, sharpened wood into teeth, laced trails with broken glass and barbed vines, set up oil-soaked ropes between trees, ready to be lit with a single spark. Jonas crafted 2 decoys, dummy figures wearing hoods and cloaks, placed where they'd be spotted first. The baby stayed with Leah, hidden in a cave by the river, safe and silent. Cora didn't sleep. Neither did Jonas. On the 3rd day, just before dawn, they saw the riders. 7 of them. No banners. No torches. just silent shapes on horses, moving through the fog like wraiths. Cora watched from a ridge above the old ferry. "They're here," she whispered. Jonas checked the line of powder hidden beneath a trail. One step closer. Grissom rode at the front. He didn't look left or right. He just stared straight ahead, toward the half-burned ferry house, where a thin line of smoke rose from the chimney. He saw the dummy on the porch. Didn't flinch. He dismounted. His men spread out. Silent hand signals. Well-trained. Deadly. Cora crouched near the river's edge, holding the match in her fingers. Waiting. Grissom stepped closer. And then, the first tripwire snapped. A branch fell, triggering the powder line. Boom! The blast threw two men backward. One screamed. Another didn't get back up. The forest lit up. Then came the fire. Cora lit the rope. The oil trail ignited. A line of flame racing up trees, down logs, encircling the men. Trapped. Blinded. Panicked horses bucked. A second trap went off, wooden spikes hidden under leaves. Another scream. Jonas charged from the trees, blade drawn, yelling like a man possessed. He took one soldier down before the rest could fire. Cora moved next, knife to one, a kick to another's knee, then vanished back into the smoke. It was chaos, but planned chaos. And Grissom? He stood in the middle of it all, calm, unmoved. He raised his pistol, fired once, hit Jonas in the shoulder. Jonas dropped, bleeding hard. Cora screamed. Grissom turned toward her voice. "You don't know what war is, girl," he called. Cora stepped into the firelight, smoke at her back. "I was born in war." She threw the second match, right into the oil pool at Grissom's feet. Whoom! Fire roared up around him. Grissom vanished in the flames. She couldn't see if he burned, couldn't see if he escaped. But when the smoke cleared, he was gone. 3 of his men dead, 1 missing a leg. 2 had run into the swamp screaming. And Jonas was alive. Barely. They carried him to the river cave. Leah stitched his shoulder. The others cleaned his wounds. Cora sat beside him. "You saved us," she said. "No," Jonas groaned. "You saved yourself." Later that night, while the others slept, Cora went back to the battlefield. Grissom's glove lay in the mud. Just one. Burned at the edge. She picked it up, tucked it into her coat, and whispered, "This ain't over." Dawn broke over the swamp like a blade through fog. The river steamed, full of ash and yesterday's screams. Smoke still curled from the trees behind them, black ribbons twisting into the morning air. Cora sat on the riverbank, watching the reflection of fire that wasn't there anymore. Jonas lay behind her in the cave, bandaged and breathing slow. The others were asleep, exhausted, blood-streaked and hollow-eyed. They'd won the battle, but they all knew it wasn't the war. Leah emerged from the shadows, her boots silent in the wet earth. She knelt beside Cora. "He's still alive, isn't he?" Cora nodded once. Grissom had vanished into the blaze like a devil made of smoke. If he'd burned, she would have found bones. But there were none. Just a melted pistol. And a glove. That morning, they buried the dead, both friend and foe. One of the reclaimers had crawled half a mile before bleeding out. They gave him no grave, just dirt and stones and silence. But for Marlene, the quiet woman with the braids who died protecting Mina, they carved a cross from driftwood and placed it by the river. Leah cried. Mina didn't, but she held Marlene's scarf to her chest for hours. Jonas awoke at dusk, pain in his eyes but strength in his voice. "You bought time," he rasped. "We need more than time," Cora said. "We need an end." Jonas chuckled, bitter. "There's no end to men like Grissom." "Maybe not," she said, "but there's an end to this." That night, Cora made a decision. They couldn't just keep running. Couldn't just fight from the trees and hope monsters like Grissom disappeared. They had to expose him. Not just kill him, but burn his name, the stories, the chain behind him, the buyers, the hunters, the fake law they wore like masks. They needed proof. They needed a witness. And there was only one man who'd seen Grissom's deals from both sides. Isaiah. Leah stared at her when she said it. You think he's alive? I don't know, Cora admitted. But if he is, he'll be in Red Vale. Jonas went pale. Red Vale, he said. That's suicide. Red Vale was a former army fort turned slave yard, rebuilt after the war by men with badges and no conscience. A private compound. No maps. No laws. Just pain. But Cora didn't blink. If he's there, we bring him out. 2 days later, they moved again. Quiet. Fast. 7 women and a wounded man. 1 baby, wide-eyed as always. They followed the edge of the Black River, moving only at night, hiding by day. Jonas taught them signs, knots in trees, rock patterns. The code of the underground never died. It just waited. Red Vale rose like a rotten tooth from the swamp. Black palisades, rusting towers, smokestacks burning at all hours. They watched from a ridge, just far enough to see the guards. 6 at the gate, more on the wall, dogs, guns. But they also saw deliveries, wagons, food, water barrels, and 1 strange cart, covered in canvas, guarded tighter than the rest. Cora pointed. That's how we get in. That night they waited near the trail. The wagon came slow. 2 guards. 1 driver. They never saw the rope stretched across the path. The wagon flipped sideways, crashed into the ditch. Before the men could scream, they were dragged into the dark. No one died, but no one walked away unbroken. They took the canvas, the cart, the harnesses. Jonas disguised himself as the driver. Bruised, bloodied, slumped low like he'd been riding all day. Leah and Cora hid inside, weapons ready. The others stayed behind. Jonas would signal if they didn't return. The guards at Red Vale barely looked up, just waved them through. Slavery was routine here, even when the chains were invisible. Inside, Red Vale was worse than stories. Barracks full of men with empty eyes. Cells built from shipping crates. Children chained to posts. Women sorting supplies under watch. And above them all, in the tower, Grissom, alive, burned on one side of his face, but alive, watching the yard like a vulture waiting for something to die. They found Isaiah in a locked shed near the back. Bruised, thin, alive. Cora dropped to her knees. He didn't recognize her at first. Then he whispered, "Thought you were Smoke." She smiled. "I was. But I came back for you." They escaped during the shift change. Set fires in 3 corners of the yard. Freed the dogs. Cut the lights. And when the guards scrambled, they slipped out the front in the same cart they came in. Only now they weren't hiding. They were carrying evidence. Names, ledgers, witnesses, and 1 man, Isaiah, who had seen it all. By the time Grissom realized, the gate was in flames. The cart gone. The cells empty. And Cora's mark carved into the tower wall. There. The next day, newspapers in 2 cities printed the same headline. Former officer tied to secret slave ring. Survivor testifies. Grissom's name burned. And this time the ashes stayed. 3 weeks later the world had changed. Not completely, not loudly, but somewhere in the cracks, between headlines, whispers, and radio static, the truth had begun to bloom. Grissom's face was in the papers. Once a respected officer, now a wanted man. Charged with human trafficking, abuse of authority, murder of civilians, and most importantly, disgraced. His compound burned to the ground the day after the story hit. No one claimed responsibility. Cora didn't need to. Isaiah testified before a grand jury. He told them everything. The codes, the deals, the chains no one saw. He was calm, clear, and fearless. Because when you've been buried alive and clawed your way back, no man in a suit can shake you. Leah moved north with the baby. Jonas stayed behind to rebuild. The women scattered, like seeds carried by wind. But not to hide, to speak, to organize, to be seen. Cora stayed in the south. She walked into towns that once feared her and stood tall. Because now they knew her name. And what's more dangerous than a woman with a knife? A woman with a story. 1 year later, at a small monument by the river, the place Isaiah first called home. They gathered. 7 women, 1 man, a child, and a new future. There were no chains, no uniforms, just scars and voices, and fire, the good kind. That night, someone asked Cora, "Do you ever miss the silence?" She smiled, looked around, at the lanterns, at the baby laughing in the grass, at the smoke rising not from war, but from celebration, and said, "No, silence is what let monsters hide." But we knocked. And this time, the world opened its damn door. If you made it this far, hey you, yes you, still reading or watching at the end of the story, do us a favor and, like the video, leave a comment below what part hit you the hardest. And let us know, where are you watching from? Also, what time do you usually watch stories like this? That helps us know the best time to post so you don't miss future stories. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. More gripping, cinematic stories drop every week. Until next time, knock back. We're always listening.